Hey, Bible lovers. Sometimes tragedy can hit Christians and it's really hard to process. And in light of the wildfires in the West and COVID-19 over the last almost 2 years, Cam and Kofi have both seen some pretty difficult times. And I thought it would be good to discuss with them how they found hope during these situations and what they look to for inner strength. So I really hope that you enjoy this More Than a Nickel's Worth series. So, anyhow, check it out. All right, what's up? I'm here with Kofi and Cam Hyde, and this is More Than a Nickel's Worth. And we got a really cool topic for you today. We're going to talk about overcoming obstacles as Christians and kind of how these two men have faced some pretty big problems in their life, and yet here they are still doing great things for God. Kofi is a church planter, and Cam is a youth pastor, and all three of us also review Bibles. So this should be fun. So Kofi, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Kofi Adeboyan here, coming from Medford, Oregon, and church planter at Redeemer Bible Fellowship.
And something tells me that Oregon doesn't tell the whole story with you. I sense an accent.
Yes, born and raised in London, England. So grew up in East London and moved here in 2017. Yeah.
Awesome. Cam, introduce yourself.
Name's Cam Hyde. I am from London, Kentucky, and I am a student pastor currently, and also using my car as an office right now.
Quietest place you can get.
That's
you
right.
have two small children.
Three small children.
Three small children. What's the ages?
I have soon, like within a week, soon to be 5, 3, and 2 to 3 months.
Okay. Kofi, you have any kids?
One son, Gareth, he is 15 months old.
15 months old. So both y'all babies. I have a widespread. I have an 18-year-old that's a sophomore in college. I have a 16-year-old who is, and that's my daughter. I have an 18-year-old son that's a sophomore in college. I have a 16-year-old who's a junior in high school. And I have a 13-year-old boy who is, oh Lord, he's in the 8th grade. And then I have a 5-year-old. It's in a category all by himself. So there was this huge gap, and he was not intended, but he is definitely a blessing to us and keeps me hopping at about to be 48 years old this Sunday. And I have a 5-year-old. So yeah, go figure. So anyhow, just to ask you all a question, both of you all have dealt with pretty major crises in your life. Kofi, you lost everything in a house fire that initially was thought to be a wildfire, but then later on it was discovered that it was a human set fire, which makes it even more difficult to process in your mind. Because if it's a wildfire, you know, there's the sovereignty of God that we play into a factor there, and there's a lot of things that we put into that. But when it's set by a human, it just seems, I don't know, it hits a different spot. And Cam overcame COVID and COVID pneumonia, spent some time in the hospital. His wife ended up getting it and just had a really tough go. So we'll start with Kofi. And I just want to ask you, how did you manage to get through that moment? And, you know, emotionally, and how did your relationship with God and the relationship with the church community and even the relationship with the Bible community that we've all come to know and love, how did that help push you through this?
Oh, that's a really great question. So just to give a bit of a timeline for what happened, the fire, which we know locally as the Almeida fire, happened on a Tuesday afternoon. So Tuesday afternoon, I'm usually at my previous house. We had an office outside. That's where I did all my work. So usually I was out in the office, but for whatever reason, I was indoors that day. So I'm sitting indoors with wife and the little one, and I'm just scrolling through Twitter, and I start seeing alerts about a fire down in Ashland. Ashland's about 10 miles south of us. And it's climbing up the freeway. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll keep an eye on that. And then it's like, it's at exit 14, 17, 19. We lived at exit 24. And at that point, we're like, we might want to grab some stuff just in case. And so we just start throwing stuff in the car. Obviously, we've got a baby, so you've got to grab all of his stuff. And, you know, he has no idea what's happening, so he needs to be held while stuff's getting grabbed. But in that moment, I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe the fire services will get on top of it. It'll be fine. I'm not too worried about it. Eventually, we could actually see the smoke from the fires behind the street that we were on. And I think at that point it hit me, this is not going to go well.
Right.
And, emotionally in those moments, you've got to kind of keep it together, especially as, the husband in the home. Like, last thing your wife needs is you basically panicking. But,
Right.
internally, I'm like, internally, I'm thinking, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad. So we pull out of our driveway eventually. We have to take both our cars, obviously. But as we're pulling out, I'm like, we're not coming back to this home. I just knew internally, this is it. But even in that moment, I'm thinking, okay, this is a complete nightmare. We'd only been in that home just over a year. It was our first home. Okay, what are we gonna do? But in those moments, I'm having to rehearse to myself the things I know to be true about God in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, God is sovereign over this. This comes from the loving hand of a good God. I don't really understand what's happening right now, but I don't need to understand what's happening right now. I just need to trust him, do the next thing. And honestly, that's one thing that kept me sane in the days afterwards. It was trust God, do the next thing.
Right. So there came a point where you knew, I'm going to lose my home.
Mm-hmm.
It was unavoidable. It's like, as you saw it moving up those exits, there was a point where it became real to you, to where this is an unstoppable force, to where this is going to go well for my home. So you rehearse the goodness of God. And then there's still this layer of hope that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll defy the odds. Maybe this will go well. And then, of course, it went exactly as you suspected. It wiped you out. You lost a library that you had probably spent many years building. And that's devastating in and of itself. Because I can't imagine that every book that I've ever bought is suddenly gone. I can't wrap my head around that. And I saw the community rally around you.
Yep. Yeah.
And I can't imagine how encouraging that was, to know that there are people that you will never meet that care enough about the fact that a person suffered something pretty tragic. And then here you are. I didn't even know you before this. I know you because of what happened to you. And that's how I came to know a little bit about you, is because of this event that happened. And I saw this community rallying around you. And I just thought that was a really cool moment. So I can't imagine that wasn't part of the process that brought healing to this situation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, almost immediately after we lost everything, we obviously had to start dealing with insurance. And that meant, what was at points a very frustrating experience, having to, at least for memory, and thankfully we who buy more Bibles than we should tend to have receipts floating around everywhere. So that helped. But as I start putting this list together, and people start asking, you got a list? Can we help in some way? Like, within the week, like, stuff started coming from all over the place. I mean, I don't have an address anymore, technically. So the local UPS store were very kind and offered like virtual mailboxes to any fire victims. And so basically I set up a virtual mailbox with them. And then the stuff just started coming from everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
Hey, I've got this. I ended up with nicer Bibles than I had before the fire. Just people sending me stuff. Hey, I've got this Quintel I don't really use. You can have it. Oh, I have to shout out a couple of people, especially Dave Dalfino over at Cherry Hill Bibles. He had done a rebind for me. I got it like a week before the fire, which was for me really frustrating. I was like, oh, seriously, I just paid money for that. But Dave was like, don't worry, I'll do you a brand new one. It's on me. It's fine. That was amazing. Make sure I get the name. Yeah. Brendan Taliaferro over at Retreasured Rebound Bibles did a really nice rebind for me as well. But loads of people just started sending stuff, books started coming in, Bibles started coming in, and that was encouraging because we weren't alone in what we're dealing with. People were sending us stuff. A friend of my wife started a GoFundMe for us. in the space of about 3 weeks, we raised about $120,000, which was a real answer to prayer, because we had some savings, of course, but you don't plan for losing your home and having to basically
Right.
find another home and all of that. But again, people from all over the community kind of, helped. People ran fundraisers for us. It was just such a encouraging time, and that really helped with dealing with this tough situation.
Yeah. And Cam didn't lose his house, but in the middle of a pandemic that seems to just gain new life every week, they told us to social distance and quarantine, and that would help. It didn't help. They told us to wear masks, and that would help. It didn't help. They told us to get the vaccine, and that would help, and it doesn't appear to be helping. Now, obviously, you could argue that those who get the vaccine have a less severity of it, but it's still spreading like crazy. The numbers are not changing, no matter our efforts, and that alone can be discouraging. And I don't know about you all, but when we were in that 2-month hole of not being able to be around people, it was a very disheartening time all by itself. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle of all that, to actually get COVID. And then you get COVID and you think, okay, well, 99% of the people that get COVID don't get COVID pneumonia. So I'm probably good. I'm young. And then the next thing you know, you have COVID pneumonia. And it's like, okay, well, I'm young. I'm probably going to be over this. Then you're struggling to breathe. And the next thing you know, you're in the ER. And I can't imagine the hole that put you in. So kind of like I asked Kofi, what did you do to cope with that? What were some of the things that you did to kind of say, you know what, I'm going to be okay. God is in control. How did you manage that emotionally?
Well, it was, it didn't start out too bad, and then as it keeps going, and then your wife gets it, and she is pregnant. My wife was pregnant when she got COVID, and she was thinking, oh, well, he's had this a week before I did, so he'll be able to take care of me now. And instead, right, I get pneumonia and get even worse than her. And so she's pregnant and still having to take care of our kids and take care of me. And she has COVID and is pregnant. All of that became really frustrating, really discouraging, those types of things. And so one of the best things, we talk a lot about nice Bibles, but they're useless if we're not in them, right?
Right.
Those nice Bibles, the content is what really makes them premium, because it's the living, active Word of God. And so you do start preaching that truth to yourself, because hopefully you've been reading the Word, you're still reading the Word while you're sick. And for a while there, I got really discouraged. And Tim, to be honest, one of the best things was you just being an ear to me. I remember just kind of lamenting to you and feeling bad, but having somebody there to listen to you, just to let you vent your frustrations, who also can point you to Christ and point you to truth, is some of the biggest encouragement to help you through hard times. Just knowing that you're heard, and that somebody out there cares. And obviously we know the Lord cares, but having that person to just kind of encourage you and say, just don't give up, just keep going, and to cheer you on even when you're going through those hard things, is a really huge thing. And so I really appreciated your friendship during that time, and it meant a lot to me just to be able, just the fact you would let me kind of vent to you about the frustration or just grief I was feeling going through those things, and just to have somebody remind you, the Lord still sees you, and you'll get to the other side. So that was good.
Well, and the common thread that I see with both of your responses to this is number one, you had to dig into what you knew. Because sometimes the circumstances that you live in don't match the reality of the Word, and we have to determine which one is telling us the truth. And that's just a fact. It's like the Word says something. It's like we have Proverbs, right? But we also have Ecclesiastes and Job. Everybody loves to quote the Proverbs. But we don't like to quote Ecclesiastes and Job, because Ecclesiastes and Job tells us, sometimes things don't always go ideally, and sometimes we don't know why. And what's really interesting about the story of Job, who went through a pretty tough circumstance, I think we can all agree. Not only did he have a house fire, he lost his kids, he lost his cattle, he lost everything. If we could put Job on this podcast, he'd say, "Children, sit down, let me learn y'all something." But the fact is, and also Job had an unsupportive wife in the midst of all this as well. But what I find most fascinating about Job is we get to know what happened, because of the writer knew the circumstances. God never told Job what happened. He never told Job, "Oh yeah, there's an enemy that tried to destroy you." And he did it obviously under my care and permission, but I wasn't doing these things to you. Because the whole time, everyone was kind of blaming God in Job. Job and his four buddies, they were all kind of blaming God. And while God allowed it, clearly, we see that in the beginning, it wasn't God's hand doing it. This was the hand of an enemy. And I think that's pretty incredible to really tell us God doesn't have to tell us. Why did somebody set that fire? Why can we not find a solution for COVID? He doesn't have to reveal those things to us. And I believe that the way to blessing, like Job had, is to just at the end of the day, Job voiced his complaints. I mean, he challenged God to a court date. It's pretty bold stuff. I don't think I could do that. He's like, I want a meeting with God in court, and I want him to explain himself. But there was this underlying steadfastness that he had, that he trusted God. And at the end, it worked out and he was blessed. And I could say with confidence, based on both of your current circumstances, that you came out of this and you are more blessed now than you were when this happened. Not only do you have the advantage of not having COVID anymore, not only do you have the advantage of having your library restored, and you do have a new home, correct? Kofi?
Yep. Very quickly found a new home, and that was a blessing all of itself. That's its own story that we need a whole hour just to get into. But new home, new library. Yeah. Things have been, in fact, it's a better home than the one we had previously. So
right. Better home. And you said you had better Bibles.
Yes, much nicer Bibles.
So to a degree, you all both had Job-like experiences to where you came out of this. And number one, you have an appreciation for things that you probably didn't even know to appreciate before. And you're in a pretty good situation. So God, you have another child, Cam, your wife, which it was considered very dangerous for a pregnant woman to get COVID. So all of this has really worked out well for you all. And that's a testament, in my mind, to the goodness of God.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this, and then we'll move on to another segment. Was there any point to where either of you felt, is my circumstance going to get better? Now, I'm not talking about theologically. Okay, theologically, we know God is good and God works all things together for the good of them who love him and are called according to his purpose. So theologically, we've got it worked out in our mind. Okay, God is going to intervene in this situation in some way. And even if this kills me, then to be absent from the body, be present with the Lord, I'm better off. But was there ever a point where either of you were like, is this actually going to get better emotionally? I'm just curious.
Cam, I'll let you go first on that one.
I mean, I was in a dark spot emotionally at one point. There were these points where I would cough, and that's like it just bred more coughing. And so I got the point that sticks out to me is I was in the ER in the middle of the night. It was like 2 a.m. I was by myself and I had just finished this treatment and they were going to let me go home. And I tried to get up and walk out the door and I couldn't. Like I was coughing so bad that I was just stuck over the trash can dry heaving. and I just couldn't quit coughing. And there was a nurse just leaning against the door, like, "Oh man, yeah, that sucks." She's like, "You should be taking cough syrup around the clock," but that was like a really low point, and I was just like, you know, is it going to get better? Obviously, it will eventually get better, but
Right.
Emotionally, you're so low, you're so worn out that you do just think to yourself, well, is this it? Is this just going to be like this?
Right. So what did you do in that moment to dig down and find hope?
In that moment, to be honest, I'd love to give you some really big spiritual answer, but it wasn't that way. It was just more so like, I'm just trying to do the next thing. I'm just trying to walk out of this hospital, and then I'm trying to get in the car and drive home. There was an ice storm in the middle of that night, and so there were ambulances coming in left and right. I was pretty low on the totem pole that night, actually, as far as their triage goes, because there were car wrecks happening left and right in our town that night because of this major ice storm that was going on. And so I was just trying to do the next thing to get home, because you are, in those moments, you are thinking of what I guess I would say you're thinking of what you have to live for, right? You're thinking of your wife, your kids. I want to get better for them. I don't want this to be the end, because it is better if I stay, and I do want to take care of my family. And so I don't have a super spiritual answer, I guess, in that moment. It's just trying to do the next thing because you just kind of want to survive.
Right. Well, but I think there was a nugget in there. You talked about a purpose, a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason that I want to fight this. And that's because God has given me a family. God has given me people that I care about, and God has given me people that care about me. And I'm telling you, if you don't have that, imagine being a person that doesn't have that anchor, that purpose, that thing, to where they think, this is why I'm going to keep fighting. I can't imagine what that would be like. So, Kofi, what about you? Was there ever a time where you wondered, are things ever going to get better? Is my life ever going to go back to the way it was before? And what resources, what did you dig into to find hope during those times?
Yeah, definitely. I think, in the first couple of days after the fire, we did one night in a hotel, and then we did 2 or 3 days with a family who were part of our church at the time. And I remember sitting there, I think the second day in this family's house, and just thinking, like, this is just like rock bottom. And we've been going through a rough ministry season as it was, and then this happened on top of that.
Right.
I think I'll be fully transparent in this moment. There were multiple times where I thought, if I could really go back to the UK, I really would. Like, this is driving me mad. But I think in tandem with what Cam was saying, like, recognizing, okay, hold on, but you've got a church here that's depending on you. Bigger than that, you've got a wife and a son who are depending on you. Like, playing with my kid in those days, which I've always enjoyed playing with my son, but especially in those, because of course he had no idea what was going on. He was like a few months old. For him, it's like, oh, we're on vacation. But playing with him was one of the things that God used. I mean, it sounds weird to say out loud, but just seeing him be carefree and not be so bothered really ministered to me. It's like, he really trusts that, mama and papa have got it. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of where I need to be in this moment. My Heavenly Father has got this. Like,
right.
It'll be fine. Yes, I feel the loss of losing a home, a library, devastation to our community. I feel all of that. But in the long run, I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only is God in full control of this, of course, know that theologically, but there are also people who care, people that I'm called to care for. And yeah, I need to be strong for them as well as for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty profound right there. When you really think about the faith of a child and how they were so unaffected by this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, fatherhood kind of changes everything. It really gives you a perspective of God that you cannot have otherwise, because there's this level and capacity to be able to love that you didn't know you had before. And it just brings this understanding to see your child. I have a similar situation. When in 2009, I was a youth pastor at the church I currently pastor at, and my pastor had an extramarital affair. And in this extramarital affair, things went very badly. I don't want to get into details because this is going to be public, but things went very badly, and it caused a massive split in our church. And things got really combative and ugly. And I was kind of the ugly head at the face of it all, because as the youth pastor, I ended up being the interim. I had no desire to be the pastor. I wanted to remain the youth pastor. And then I recognized the uglier this got, the less of a reality that was going to be. I'm not going to be able to remain the youth pastor here. If they bring in a new pastor, he's going to bring in his own staff. And I have two options here: leave or try to become the pastor. So I tried to become the pastor, and that's when the fireworks started. It was rough. It was a very rough season. And I was to a place where it was like, I don't even know if I'm going to survive this. I don't know if I'm going to be able, who's going to want to hire a guy that just came out of a devastating situation. I grew a church from almost 300 to barely 100 in a matter of months. So it was a messed up situation. It was so bad. I was at a soccer game with one of my kids, and there was this family, and they were clearly hurting. And I was talking to them about God because I still had that part of me functional. You know, the Christian man in me was functional to where I can find hope and I can lead others to hope. But the pastor in me was devastated, broken, not knowing how to shepherd. It was a tough period. There were times the church would tell us not to come to church on Sunday. They would tell us to go somewhere else, and I was the interim pastor. So I was sitting here talking to this young couple, and they were like, we need to get back in church. I was like, yes, you do. You need to find you a place to work. Well, where do you pastor at? And I was like, dude, no, don't come to my church. And I believe it was at that point I was like, where do you go from there? As a pastor, you're leading this family to this place of hope. And then when it comes time to do the thing every pastor's trying to do, shepherd people, I'm telling them, I can't do that for you. And of course, they were curious, and I was like, our church is in a really bad place right now. And I recommended a church, and they're there to this day, effective leaders. That's still a sore spot for me. I'm thankful that another church is being blessed by this couple. And I'm also thankful that I helped them find their purpose and help them find the Savior. But that was a low point. And there was a point where I asked myself, is this situation ever going to change? Are my days in ministry over? And I was to a point to where I was willing to take a secular job. It's just like, I say that tongue in cheek. I don't believe in the difference between secular and sacred. I think everything's sacred, that a child of God does. But for lack of a better term, a non-pastoral job. And it was just a few weeks later that the situation just completely changed. And our district oversight came in and appointed me for a 2-year period. And it was rough after that. But, and still to this day, we still feel the effects of that. It's been almost 12 years since this happened, and we still feel the effects of this. But we've got a great congregation. And I'm going to tell you how I pulled through this. And to piggyback off of something that Kofi said, my children were very small at the time. My oldest was about 10, and then the others were little, and they just didn't care. They went to their Royal Rangers, which is kind of the equivalent to, I think it's called Kiwanis, which is like a Boy Scout kind of thing in a Christian vein. They go to those things, and now there'd be times I'd call my wife and say, don't bring the kids today. It's not good. So even telling my family to stay home from a church that I pastored, that's inconceivable to me. So they just kind of lived their lives and did their thing, and it was baffling to me. It's like, how can you not know what's going on here? And like Kofi, I kind of had a similar revelation. It's like, you know what? If they're not worried about this, what is wrong with me? As an adult, why can't I trust God with this situation? But I think you all can both admit and kind of have that trusting God in theology and trusting God in practical life is hard. It's like, I've got it theologically in my mind. This is how this works. This is how this is going to go. But then you see your circumstances and they don't match. And it's like, in my mind, I know eventually it's going to match. But right now, it's going the opposite direction. And my kids really helped me pull through that. But I'll tell you who was the champion of that whole thing was my wife. It was like every moment that I was down, she was up. And every moment that she was down, I was up. It was like we were just able to carry each other because we were all we had. We didn't know who to trust in the church. When you're going through something that traumatic, you don't know who is who. Even the good people are sometimes doing things that don't make sense because everyone's confused. So I am thankful for that season in my life. That's kind of my little mini Job experience. I'm thankful for that season in my life. I'm not thankful for what went down, but I'm thankful for how God used it. So that was a pretty incredible circumstance. So, man, just powerful stuff when you really think about human tragedy and the way that we're able to cope with these things and find our way through them most of the time through a child. It's pretty amazing. So as you can see, sometimes in life we got to dig down and find those reasons to continue to fight and find inspiration through whatever means necessary, whether it's through His Word or through a child, something as simple as a kid. But anyhow, hope is a powerful thing, and I really hope that maybe this video has inspired hope in some of you. Anyhow, there you have it. Keep calm. Jesus on. This is more than a nickel's worth.